All right, we doing it? Looks like we're doing it. Yes. Um. So let's talk about this awesome show because I was just so completely enamored. I don't even know where to begin. So how good was the Batman?
Long
That's
movie.
what are you talking about? It's one of those films that I finished, and the first thought that occurred to me was like, when can I see this again? Even though it's like 3 hours and 15 minutes or whatever. Like I loved it that much.
Yeah.
Oh wait, am I just the target demographic for the Batman? Like a grungy 90s emo, like action.
Well,
Yeah, maybe I'm just the target.
I mean, maybe like that. I think a movie is too long when I'm sitting there watching it and going, "This is a long movie. How long has this movie been going on? Oh my God, there's an hour and a half left. What the fuck?"
See, I didn't feel that when I was in the theater or when I watched it on subsequent viewings. So maybe it's just like I get that.
But
I think it is too long, but
well,
I didn't notice it.
let me restate that because I think I'm trying to think of how to say this. Like there are movies with like pacing problems, right? And I don't know that I would say the Batman had pacing problems because I think they set the tone very early. And this is a movie thing that I think is very important is that they tell you right at the beginning of like what kind of movie is this going to be. And from the outset, it felt like this is going to be a slow burn. And it was. So I think when you set expectations correctly like that, it works a lot better. Although like, again, I still did feel like this is a long movie, but not necessarily long because of any pacing issues. It was just long. There was a lot in it. There was a lot happening.
Yeah, it's a big story they're trying to tell.
And it's weird when I have those thoughts that like this movie is so long and it still has another hour and a half, like you said. Like I think I had that thought during the Batman as well, but it was from a more positive perspective. Like, oh my gosh, there's an hour and a half left. Like it's been so good
Yeah,
so far. There's an hour and
that's
a half left. You know?
similar to my to how I received it. I mean I completely agree with Ryan. I think it's biting off a lot, but I think it chews it well. And I think it's one of those things where like you can tell that the people behind it, Matt Reeves really had an idea for a thing, and he fully did the thing, and they gave him the money to fully do the thing. And I think so rarely these days do we get someone who gets to fully do the thing they were trying to do, and he does it, and there's such a commitment to it. And it's a fucking long, it's a big project, but it's in the same way that like, and maybe it's just the way I think about this stuff is it's like a really big book. You know, when you pick up like a doorstop Stephen King novel. Boy, I can't even talk this morning. It's gonna be fun. Pick up a doorstop Stephen King novel, and you know what you're in for. And it's that kind of thing. And I think you're right. It does advertise it very early on in the tin, but it does feel. I guess the length is perhaps what gives it its sense of scale and grandeur. But I guess speaking of which, are we going to talk about how good this week's episode of the fucking Mandalorian was?
I know, right?
Fuck?
In a minute.
In a minute.
We'll
But
get...
what? Yeah, I just want to put a pin in that and just say what the fuck.
I know. Like I wanted to start off with a joke about just going straight into the Batman, but I was like, this episode was so freaking good.
It's we have to square away a bit of the Batman, and then we'll come back to it because I think they're not interrelated. Luke B makes a really good observation. I think information density is important to the feeling of length. How efficiently is the movie conveying information? That's how I think of pacing. Carefully controlling how much the audience gets, and I think that Batman
Well said.
sticks it at every turn. And even though you do feel the length, it feels like, you know what it feels like? It feels like reading an old detective dime novel or watching an old noir film. It has that same sense of pacing, to the point where it even has the false ending where you think that the film's over, and then it's, you know, you get the second reveal, much in the way that The Dark Knight does, but I think less effectively.
I was thinking there is one part in particular that sticks out to me as not in keeping with the there was I think the only time in the movie where, like, remember it's a lot of the movie is very slow. It's the only time in the movie where I felt like this doesn't feel like it belongs in this movie. Do you know what part I'm talking about? Think about it for a minute.
I have a feeling like I had that thought a couple times, but now I can't remember exactly which particular pieces. The I want to say is something to do with the car chase, like stylistically.
Exactly right. It is the car chase. I was like, this doesn't feel like it belongs in this movie. Not only that, but at the end, I was like, at least 20 or 30 people died back there. Like, there was a massive, like, this like tanker trucks flying over and just exploding, and everything. Yeah, 20 or 30 people died back there in that wreck.
And the whole show is about him being a detective and actually like tracking stuff down, tracking people down, and it's like he couldn't just let the car get away and then track them down later. It was like, no, I have to cause all this destruction.
I think it was a real Hollywood kind of moment that, in an actual noir story, either would have been a car chase that was pretty quiet and small, or would have been like a foot chase, like through, you know, you see in, they do this in Attack of the Clones. Is that the name of the film?
It depends on which one you're talking about. That is a name of the, yes.
The second,
when Anakin's flying through the air, that one.
Well, the foot chase specifically when they chase the bounty hunter through the bar. And, you know, through the crowded streets of Coruscant.
Yeah.
You actually do get that you can imagine a similar sequence in this film, which they kind of do sort of in the nightclub, but you don't really get the same like sort of tracking scenario. So, yeah, I agree. I think it's odd and out of place. It's also cool as fucking hell. It's dope. Like, it's just a cool. It's like a interestingly shot car chase. It has nothing to do with geography and just all about emotion. Which I think, depending on your taste, is going to pretty wildly vary whether you enjoy it or not.
Yeah,
it does feel out of place.
That's why I said, like, stylistically, the car chase fit, but there was something in the back of my brain that was going, that didn't feel right. And that's amazing that it was exactly what Rye was thinking about. What was the other one, Rye?
The other thing.
Yeah, you said there were a couple.
Oh no. So there was, I was saying there was one thing that didn't really fit to feel like it felt to me or feel.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, my head is all over the place. But yeah,
just the car. Okay.
The other thing I wanted to talk about was like one of my favorite aspects of the movie was, and this is a really important thing in a movie like this, is the villain. And I am so sick of, like, I feel like in Dark Knight that Heath Ledger ruined a generation of villains. Because
he was too good.
He was so good. And then, like, is it Batman versus Superman with what's his name, Eisenberg's Lex Luthor? It's like he is just
that's
straight. All I can see is him just channeling a really poor imitation of Heath Ledger. And you see that so much in villains. And then, like, this guy, I was like, I'm not seeing Heath Ledger here, and I love that.
Paul Dano puts on the performance of his career as just like a little weirdo. He's just like a little weird far right internet creepazoid. Like, he's just a little weird incel guy. And, like, I think that it takes a lot of restraint to kind of execute that in the way that they do. Me and Darth talked about this in our Sherlock show, and there is a literary term for what happened because of Heath Ledger, which is the Joker-ification of villains, where this phenomenon occurred where so many filmmakers and writers saw Heath Ledger's Joker, and they changed the affective register of their characters to sound and behave like Heath Ledger's Joker, right? You had Moriarty from Sherlock. You have Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. Basically every fucking villain under the sun, right? And one of the consequences of that Joker-ification was directors and casting directors were picking people that were close enough to having the energy and they could do the performance of Heath Ledger, but they didn't have the presence of Heath Ledger. And I think there's a real difference. And I think Paul Dano has the presence for the character because they cast two type. They weren't trying to they weren't trying to be like every actor who's a villain should be behaving like Heath Ledger. And so they're all casting against type. They went, what do we have in Paul Dano? He was really good in that film about the Beatles or whatever. What's his like special sauce? And his special sauce is like kind of being a weird introvert guy who doesn't have a lot of luck with women and who's kind of a bit of a creep. And they played it super well. He's phenomenal.
The chat's trying to get us back on point here.
Chat's trying to get us on Star Wars. I don't know if anything I said just made sense because I've forgotten all of it as it came out of my mouth.
No, I read.
Barely
I was picking up what you were putting down there.
He's barely listening to what you were saying. Dave was like, I don't know what I just said. I wasn't listening to any of it.
I need more caffeine in me. I've got in front of me right now. I have. I went to the Macca's drive-thru and I got an adult breakfast, which is I got a sausage and egg McMuffin meal with a flat white, and then I got a cheeseburger meal with a Coke. And so I've got both in front of me. I've had the hash brown. I'm drinking the coffee. I've started on the egg McMuffin. I've started on the cheeseburger, and I'm also drinking the Coke. So I'm just really splitting the difference, just seeing what will fix me, you know?
So no hair of the dog?
Not yet. I might still be drunk from last night. I didn't get to bed till 1:30, so I honestly, it's because I'm not hungover. I'm just tired, which makes me worry that when we finish this recording at 1 p.m.
Still on, yeah.
I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble, boys.
You're gonna have to finish this stream with a drink.
I legitimately might have to. We'll see how we go.
All right.
Before we really get into the meat of the episode, this is gonna make y'all just absolutely cringe. I'm still getting used to the live chat feature, right? So don't at me, but you're about to at me because I thought that you stole everything that Luke said there. And I was like, wait, he's just repeating what Luke is saying. How is he just stealing this guy's words and not saying anything about it? And then I realized
the words out of my mouth before Luke were
I
Luke
know.
says.
And that's when I was like, oh, that's what he meant by Luke says. I thought he was talking about Luke Skywalker and you were quoting Luke Skywalker. I was like, I don't remember that from the movie.
Darth, I would simply never reference Luke Skywalker. One of the weakest. Anyway, we can't talk about it. I can't upset all the Star Wars fans. But no, I was talking about Luke from chat. Luke B. What's good? What's good, Luke B? What's good, Derp Poltergeist? Good to see you all in chat. Hope you're living large. Breakfast time is subjective. However, I'm in Australia, so it is technically breakfast time.
All right.
All right,
take
yeah.
us away.
On to
the Joker, or what are you thinking?
I'm ready for Mando.
Yeah. Let's
the show that we're here to do.
Yeah,
we want to actually do that.
Hey, what the this was a fucking good episode,
right?
I mean, we'll get into it, but they click. And listen, I know Jon Favreau wrote this before Andor came out, but this some fully Andor shit is what this episode is. This is some fully Andor shit, and I'm here for it.
That's what granted, I still haven't finished Andor, so I can't make the full comparison. Shame. But it was so different than anything that we've had before.
Can we get some F's in the chat for Darth being a fake Star Wars? I'm just getting to Clone Wars now. I haven't watched Andor. You're on a bloody Star Wars YouTube channel, mate. Come on, take your boots off. Jesus.
It's like that scene from Deep Space Nine. It's a fake.
This is chapter 19, yeah?
The convert.
The convert.
Yeah, so we have, and I don't know if this has happened before, where it was like a literal immediate transition from the previous episode. No time lapse whatsoever. So she pulls him out of the water, and then this episode starts, and he's still like choking up water, like it was that quick. And it starts off with her casually asking, "Yo, did you see a huge monster down there?" And he's like, "No, I didn't see a thing." And she's like, "Cool, I'm gonna keep that to myself." So y'all have any thoughts on that? Because Is that the ring of power, and she wants to keep the knowledge?
I have thoughts. I don't know if they're coherent, but it's a bad start. Come on, brain. I think it's really interesting that she let the Darksaber go so easily last episode, but is now. She said it's the specific wording she uses. She's like, "Did you see anything?" And he's like, "Nah, homie." And then she's like, "Nothing living," right? I think there's something happening here where she is trying to protect. She's let go the Darksaber as the MacGuffin, but this discovery is hers. I think there is still some tension. You know, if Din and Bo-Katan are going to be friends, allies, romantically involved, whatever, I think there is something that has to be resolved between them regarding this creature and regarding Mandalore and the throne. And I think she might see this as a way to the throne around the Darksaber. Also, I think she's starting to have this moment of like, when we see it in this episode, of like, yo, maybe this like cult shit is true. And there's something really interesting. I don't think she buys into it, right? You even see her behavior this episode, but yeah, I think it's got to be, there's some tension there around, she let him have the Darksaber, but he, you know, but this is hers, you know. Doesn't want to give him the satisfaction, doesn't want to give him that power, that full validation, control, whatever it is.
Right, you have any thoughts?
I have a few thoughts. So last time we talked about how it was more like the conclusion of that episode became more interesting because you had him being the true believer going into the waters and her just like poo-pooing the whole thing and her just being over it, and then being confronted with a real life mythosaur down there and how that would like and then this episode started off with the convert. I'm like, okay, so they're gonna do the thing that we talked about them doing, which is that she has to reconcile with the nutbags. And the other thing that I was thinking that just occurred to me is that like she's sort of got this like 7 stages of grief thing going on, where remember when he shows up at the castle, she's been like completely abandoned and she's angry with him.
Yeah.
And then we go down to like to go to the waters or whatever, and she's in denial and about like the whole thing and everything. And
but
then
she's not even in Egypt.
I was just about to make that joke.
I didn't get to it quick enough.
Yeah.
Continue.
The waters. So she's in denial of the whole thing. Like this is all crap. This is, you believe, you know, you really buy into this stuff or whatever, but like this is just like a theme park, etc. And then, you know, confronted with the thing, and then we finish with she goes to the nutbags and they're like, well, you haven't taken your helmet off, and you've been in the waters, so this is the way. And again, her trajectory or the route that she's on this season is to me much more interesting than whatever route Mando's on. I don't know what's going on with him or what his purpose is, but because again, like starting off with the season, we're like, all right, so clearly the thing is he has to go bathe in the waters of Mandalore, and we've already done that last episode. So like this, what is his and Grogu's deal this season? I don't know, but I'm much more interested in whatever's going on with Bo-Katan.
Yeah, especially with all of the stuff. Like I was trying to read up on her since I haven't seen everything in the Clone Wars, and there's like so much backstory that
She's
might
so
bring
interesting.
in.
She's a really interesting character because she represents. Oof, that's not a full thought. Give it a sec.
Join the nutbags rather than make peace with them.
Yeah.
I think that's I want to say that's going to be either I want to say I want to believe that they're somehow going to meet in the middle.
Yeah, I think there's a version of this where she ends up gaining the support of the Watch, and brings them out of their religious fanaticism toward a more of a center, and she kind of oh god, this is how the season goes, and then she kind of like becomes less radical or less like secular, She's just gonna become like a centralist politician that rules Mandalore. I feel like that's an option for them here, um, which is like interesting if they have something to say about it. But yeah, I think it'd be kind of interesting to see her pull them a little bit back from Crazy Town, and her come a little bit into some
Belief.
reverence for
Yeah.
because like it's real, like it's still a cult, and like the fact there's a big fucking space lizard in the water doesn't mean that you can't take off your helmet. In the same way that when they were like, oh my god, we found like the males and stuff from the cross or whatever. And everyone's like, yeah, we know he existed. That's not the point. Like, I think there is something materially interesting about the friction between her gaining acceptance, her lack of belief, and also her need for followers. I think that's a thread they're going to try and pull on. But as you said, Rye, that's so much more interesting than anything. Unless even if they try and push for the like Mando could be ruler of Mandalore thing, like, and I've made this observation before. I'm kind of over the fact that the main characters of this show don't really emote at all. Like Grogu's a little fucking kid that doesn't say nothing about nothing, and then Mando, like Pedro Pascal, reads his lines from a fucking teleprompter. Like I
have a
and
very.
That's why Bo-Katan is so interesting. She has so much emotion.
She actually had, there's a quote from her, and I'm not going to find the exact quote because that'll take like a minute, but I'm sure somebody will find it in the chat. But essentially, she did an interview, or like she had a statement where she said she really liked the scenes where she didn't have where she like had the helmet on, because she's like, I don't have to worry about like what's going on with my face. Is like I can put all of my energy into reacting through body language to show what's going on with the character.
Huh. Enjoying being hamstrung. That's kind of interesting choice for
Well, I mean, in a way, like it's as an actor, I would think it would be an incredible challenge to like try to convey all sorts of emotion without facial expression.
Yeah, and Pedro does. Like, I didn't mean to be sort of, it wasn't necessarily being negative in that regard.
Well, we've talked about this before. That's probably not Pedro in there. He's off shooting The Last of Us.
He's shooting The Last of Us, killing those big zombies. But I guess my point is, like, I think you can have, I mean, Bo-Katan proves you can have it both ways. When she has on the helmet, you still feel and understand what she's thinking and feeling, or what she's willing to reveal about what she's thinking or feeling. I think there's still some latitude in the character of Din to have him, and I mean this very literally, have him learn to express himself a little bit more, or be willing to express himself more. But the problem is he's into this fucking weird doomsday cult thing that is all about like stoicism and like don't reveal your feelings, and it's all about this is the way. Do you want to have a real conversation? No, oh, this is the way. Like, there's this necessary confine to it that I was sort of hoping he would have started to, and he is starting to work through it, obviously with Grogu. But I guess I kind of agree with Luke. Like, some more character is perhaps what I desire here, or perhaps to put it another way, we have a lot of characterization.
To be clear, I want to be clear. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I think it's interesting that she said that as a Mando character, that I want to say, like, if you went back and calculated the time that she's on screen, most of the time she has her helmet off, versus like him, where he almost never has his helmet off.
And I'm trying to think back to when we see her and the rest of her clique, where they all have their helmets off, and like I recall them all being way more emotive than Mando, I think, would be if he had his helmet off. So it's like, I think it's what David was saying, like this entire sect is so brainwashed that they don't understand human emotion because all they ever see are the helmets. That may be reading too much into it, but it feels like a good read on it.
I would say that's probably more an unintended side effect than any sort of conscious decision making on their part.
Agreed.
Yes, which, as we've talked about before, and this is more just to save you doing a fucking master's in writing, whether or not something is intended in a text doesn't change the way that it can impact how a text is received, because meaning of text is created at reception, not at manifestation. So the fact that it has that consequence is necessarily part of the text, even if the authors didn't intend it. And you can kill your authors all you want. You can talk about Bart's and Roland and stuff like that, but I just think it's an interesting consequence of the story they're telling, rather than saying Favreau and his boys. Favreau and who's the fucking Clone Wars guy with the hat?
Cad Bane?
No. The writer, Dave Filoni.
Oh,
Jesus. I'm so hungover.
With the hat?
yeah,
he's always wearing cowboy hats. He always
Okay,
wears weird hat.
okay, yeah.
Don't be like that.
I know, I'll give you that.
That's his thing. If you Google Dave Filoni, it's just him wearing hats. So on the Clone Wars DVDs that I own, yes.
Dave,
I'm a million years old. On the Clone Wars DVDs that I own, where they do the behind the scenes, the Filoni zone, as it were, he's always wearing a weird hat. He's a weird hat guy.
Yeah, that didn't click at first, but
every picture of him on here has got a hat on.
Vindication.
Yeah,
he's a hat guy. He's a hat guy. Y'all were giving me you were looking at me. You gave me the look, and it was unjustified. I saw it, Darth. So you pretend I didn't.
Even drunk, you're pulling out the facts and putting me to shame.
Yeah, that's right. Can't be stopped, baby. Good old Dave. Exactly right, Mr. Filoni. The one true goat.
All right, so
I don't know what we were talking about.
Yeah, getting us back on track. One thing in that same scene, they're still underground. They just came out of the water, and Din actually says what we had talked about is he wasn't pulled down. He says, "I stepped off. I fell," and to do just me thinking the cinema sins for a minute, she was not only diving after him, she had her jetpack going, so she was going faster than gravity naturally would pull, and he still was going faster. So does he have true Beskar and she doesn't, which is why he's so heavy? Or is this just stupid CinemaSins? They had to get him to the bottom of the chasm before her, so it didn't matter that she was going fast enough to actually catch him, but she couldn't.
100% stupid CinemaSins.
It's just like movies and stuff. Also, I was thinking about this. Is Din just an idiot? Is he a big dummy?
Maybe.
Like, because he's like, I was legitimately thinking about this last night when I was in my 10th beer, and like, so Din is a really good bounty hunter. He is really good at one thing. Rye has changed. Rye is now Dave Filoni wearing multiple hats. Din is a really good. He's like a heavy, right? Din's whole thing is he's a heavy, and like his character class in a video game would be like warrior, right? And so he's this big, dumb, good guy at doing damage to people. He's good at hurting people. That's his specific skill set. And so I wonder to what extent him making a mistake like this is sort of the reason that Bo-Katan is in the mix as a leader, as a potential leader, right? I think there's something interesting about there's something happening with his ability to see into things at a holistic level, whether that's because of the cult, whether it's for some other reason, don't know. But there's something there with his characterization, which got me to thinking as well, which led me to a 30-minute conversation last night. Who do you think would win, Mando or Joel? Pedro Pascal v. Pedro Pascal. Because I think Joel would annihilate him. Because I think like Joel would take longer than Beskar and just slip a knife right up under the pressurized neck bit right into his jugular. And I reckon Mando would stand there like a fucking oaf the whole time. Like I don't know who. Chat, who do you think would win? Luke? Jesus Christ! I just read Luke's name and that happened.
Luke or
Joel?
Poltergeist?
Who do you think would win? Rye or Darth. No, I was legitimately thinking about this because they're very different characters, and it's played by the same dude. And Joel specifically is very smart and exacting, and sort of he has the same affectation as a big lug, but he's got the edge to him, right? And I just don't know if Mando has it like that. He's lethal, yes. He's good at fighting, yes. But he
doesn't have I think what you're saying is Mando's got the skills, and Joel has no hesitation. He's got the decisiveness. There's a phrase that's not coming to me. I wish I had gotten as drunk as you last night. This would be more fun. But yeah, he's like, Joel doesn't have he sees the thing and he does it. And I think you're right that Mando would just hesitate just that much longer.
Exactly. I think it's just really I think he'd hesitate, but I also wonder if, because he like Mando would try and talk about it or try and work it out. Also, it depends on the circumstances. Okay, this comes up a lot. It's simple. They're on a football field. They're at either ends of the football field, and they have both clocked each other as a threat. Whether that's lethal or otherwise depends on the character. If you're ever going to pit characters against each other, it's a football field, and they clock each other as a threat. Them's the circle. They have their regular gear as if it were a regular day of whatever they're doing. So Joel has his big rifle and his pistol and whatever, and Mando has his jetpack and his pistol and his whatevers.
Mando wins.
You reckon?
100%.
What, you think the jetpack makes that much of a difference?
I'm not even saying the jetpack. It's the time that you're allowing there.
But Joel's got the big rifle. He could just pop him.
Yeah, and he's got the Beskar, which is the biggest plot armor that's ever existed.
Yeah, but Joel's gun is made in America. So, American workmanship defeats fucking little sissy cult Beskar every day.
Yeah, Luke gets it. Mando wins the football field easy.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. They're like, I'll change the scenario a bit. We're in a bar. Scene 1 of The Mandalorian. We're in a bar and Mando's there to, bring Ellie in warm or cold. Joel wins that fight 100% because he moves with action and intention and violence, speed and violence. And that's what wins that fight.
It's also weird to think about that Mando in that scene, I think, is way different than most of the other scenes where he's in. I think that's the most lethal he is in the entire 3 seasons so far. And it's like they toned him down a whole lot. Some of the fights that he loses, I'm like, why did he lose that? I thought this dude was super awesome.
Well, I think the idea is as he, I legitimately think it's character growth, right? As he realizes that he can talk to people and engage with them, and as he learns to care for Grogu, Luke knows what's up.
No, I was no, when he realizes he could talk to people, and I was like, wow, that hit home.
Yeah, he does. He's like, I don't have to shoot people. I can fucking
I can just talk to them. They go away.
He has that growth where he can negotiate, and you see that at the start of that fantastic opening episode of season 2 where he goes to the illegal underground boxing ring. And he tries to talk the guy down. And he's like, I don't want to fight you. And the guy's like, nah, but yeah. And he tries to rip him off. And Mando goes fucking sectional on him. But you can see him making the effort. I think that's really the character trajectory for him, is becoming more realized as a person that your pistol, it's like the classic gunslinger arc. Your pistol is not the solution to every problem. But it is a tool to be used with precision. It's a scalpel, not a hammer. And he's learning that as he goes, I think.
Where are we in the episode?
Yeah, let's move on to so now they're officially out of the cavern. They're back in their jet, and which is Bo's plane, and they're going back to her home planet Moon. And that's when they start getting attacked by some I don't think it's actually TIE fighters. It's not a TIE.
Right?
Yeah, interceptors, I think. And so then they decide the best course of action is to have him stop shooting at them with the guns in the plane and instead jump out and go get his own plane, because I mean, two's better than one, but still, I was kind of laughing at the fact that if you're not a good enough gunner in plane 1, why are you a better gunner in plane 2?
Because reasons.
Okay.
No, it's obviously he would be. It's a better situation tactically for him to, because now there's 2 targets instead of just 1.
It's the World War II dogfight film scenario where it's like the more planes you have in the air, the more options you have tactically to maneuver. I think on face it's silly, and I think it presents as silly because they communicate it weirdly. But the fact that Bo-Katan instantly knows what he's doing when he's like, "Yo, let me get into my ship and we can do it," and she's like, "Yeah, let's go," and then they do a Top Gun Maverick. Like that works for me in the structure of the episode. In the moment, I went, "What? That's weird." And I think it's just because they didn't try. It's like Rye, you talked about with the failure in the sequel trilogy. It just didn't feel like they'd exhausted the initial option enough for me to go, "Oh, yeah, they need another option here. They should try something else."
That might be what I'm thinking of. Is like he like literally can't hit them, and he's like, this ship is too slow, or they're too fast, or like give some excuse why he has to give up the gunner position and go get his own ship, which is way faster, so then they have a better chance. Like, I mean, that perfectly explains, I guess, what I was feeling when I was watching that.
That he wasn't on the gun long enough to get to that point.
Yeah, I guess so.
It just didn't feel. Yeah, there wasn't enough texture there for me to be like, "Oh yeah." But also, his ship is a starfighter, right? So Naboo.
Yeah. The way that you change that around a little bit is that you make getting to the starfighter the initial objective, and then he's just on the gun until that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
this is a delaying action until we get here, and that puts us in a position to win. So.
Yeah, I was gonna. Now that Luke says that about the transition from Mandalore back to the moon, it did feel like, I don't know if it was like too sudden or what. They're just like, "Oh, we're home now. Oh wait, no, we're not home. We're getting attacked." So that was a little jarring, like Luke was saying. But then you get into the action so quickly, I guess I forgot about it immediately until he brought it up again. So then they kill those first fighters, and then they turn around and look, and they're like, "Oh wait, the castle's getting bombed because the Empire wants revenge, I guess, for something."
Did we ever find out who that was? We didn't.
Who what was?
Who these Empire folks are? Where do they come from? What do they want? What is their why?
I assume it's related to the amnesty program.
What do they eat?
In some way.
What do they eat?
What do they eat?
I'm gonna get that on a T-shirt.
Deep fried Wookiee.
It feels like
it's a weird little sequence.
It feels like these are like Moff's people, but like, or when I say Moffs, I mean like it feels like these are Gideon's people. But weren't they taken out? I mean, he was taken out. I don't know how many resources he had.
Well, I thought later in the episode, when the ex-Empire people are talking, they say something about how like no one knows where he is, and they don't know if he's escaped or something.
Oh,
am I making that up?
I would be disappointed if it's Gideon, actually.
Yeah, I just make the world feel small.
I would be more excited to find out that that's Thrawn. But that begs the question of, what is Thrawn doing there?
Well, the space whales were bringing him back. That's what Grogu saw.
Yeah, but
in the deleted scene, it's Thrawn riding a space whale like a surfboard.
Yeah.
Playing like, woohoo! It's playing like the fucking opening to like fucking Knight Rider or something. That's my fanfic anyway.
All right, so her home is bombed. She tries to go off and fight like 500 TIEs all by herself, and then he eventually talks her into running away, sends her coordinates for where his covert is hiding, and says, "We're going to go off and we'll meet here." And then they jump to hyperspace, and all those TIE interceptors and all the other ones, none of them have hyperdrives, so they can't follow them. So they're just kind of, they get away scot-free.
Can I ask a Star Wars question?
Maybe.
What do you mean maybe? Yeah, like, it depends.
Ask
on
a
the
question. Maybe we'll have the answer.
How? I'm confused about hyperspace. So
is everybody else.
because
Yeah.
so you can't track people through hyperspace, right?
Not
That's the reason.
currently.
Okay.
Even in the future,
Okay.
even in the future, you can't.
So but then why? But every time you get into a dogfight, if your ship has hyperdrive, why wouldn't you just judge out of that?
If you get
that a
into
dumb
if
question?
you get into a bad spot, no, it's not. It's there's a lot of reasons that you could come up with in the moment to explain that away. But
The biggest one
it
given
is
in. Sorry, you want to finish?
I don't think I was really building to anything there.
Okay. The biggest one that's given in the books, and which you sort of see in episode 4 at least, is that it's the calculations. Like if you like, that's Han has a whole little paragraph about it, and he's like, if you jump too close to a star, then the gravity well of the star sucks you out of hyperspace and into something else. So you have to have your droid run all of these calculations across every known star, planet, asteroid, everything that exists in space before you jump on that route, to know that it's safe to do so.
Unless your name is Poe Dameron, and
Yeah.
then you just hit the go button and you're fine.
Yeah, if you're a sick lad, then you just do it on the fly. If you're an absolute
Hyperspace
unit,
skipping.
Yep.
Hyperspace Cowboy. Okay, that's a good name for a book. No one
Hyperspace
steal
Cowboy.
That's such a good name for a fucking book. No one take that. I'm taking that's mine.
Copyright.
Copyright DC McNeil. Okay, that makes sense.
Did you watch my video on hyperspace?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah. I did. And the fact that it's getting quicker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the thing that we often talk about, and I think this relates and will get us to where we're going in the next part of the episode, which is one of the biggest challenges in fiction is the second you give things like specific metrics. So the second that you give time specific metrics, like you say a week or a month or a year, and the second you give things specific distance and time do a thing to a story where suddenly our brain, because we deal with distance and time all the time, right? I say I'm going to be 5 minutes late to this recording and I'm 11 minutes late. And you go, well, that makes sense. He was stuck in the drive-thru, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense. And you intuitively go, oh, he mustn't be at home right now. He said he's stuck in the drive-thru. Because you don't assume that I'm sitting in my apartment lying to you about being in the drive-thru, because that's insane. And so, like, whenever you get details like this in a story, you make natural assumptions about geography and space and time. Now, if the text then said, actually, Dave never went to McDonald's, though that's all prop food, and he's lying to you for profit and gain somehow, in this scenario, there's some benefit to doing this for me. You suddenly go, oh, wait, but I had already assumed the other thing was true, and now it feels like a plot hole instead of feeling like a subversion of expectations or a recontextualization. There's a way in which space and time do a very kind of like crunchy thing to text, which is why a lot of the time when you go through the editorial process, a lot of editors, and I do this as well when I'm editing stories, is you try wherever you can to make it as soft as possible, where you go, okay, instead of saying a week, can we frame it in a different way that doesn't give a specific length of time but communicates the similar idea? Is there a way in which we can say, instead of saying 1 month after the events of book 1, can we say some months after and make it softer? Because the softer you make it, the less likely readers are to assume specific details about space and time in the story, and therefore the less likely you are later to contradict those assumptions. And so I think Star Wars is, and we were talking about it a lot last episode, because I made a pretty spurious joke, or I was just being a little shit, to be honest, about Mando moving around too quickly between spaces. And I think Star Wars is in a really interesting place now where, and Rye's video is a really good extrapolation of this, where it's kind of tricky to know and you really have to take it on face value. It's really tricky to know why these characters don't use certain tools at certain times, like the hyperdrive or like this, that, or the fifth thing. And I think Mando in particular does a really good job of bedding things down, and going, it kind of doesn't matter. It's really about the thrust of the narrative. It's really about the texture of what he's doing. It's not necessarily about the geography and the physical, movements between this, that, or the fifth thing. Luke makes a good point, which I think is the counterbalance, which is keeping... Huh?
The ticking clock.
The ticking clock, exactly. Having a real sense of, here's a deadline that we need to... But you can still do that. You can still do that within the narrative confines of the story without necessarily hampering the broader, contradictory nature of space-time in the story. I think Game of Thrones is a really good example of here's what I would say. If you make it load-bearing, which is what Game of Thrones does, Game of Thrones distance and geography is a load-bearing plot device. The fact that someone can't get on a ship and turn up in King's Landing for 6 months is a really important detail.
Until season 8.
Exactly. And the second that they break that, the whole story falls apart. And so I think it's one of those things where, you're between a rock and a hard place. And it's like anything in storytelling. There's trade-offs for every decision you make. Stories that are too soft feel wishy-washy without stakes. Stories that are too specific, like Game of Thrones, if you don't land it, kind of ruins your entire structural apparatus. Not sure where I was going with that. Lost the original thought, but...
Well, we were talking about Luke's thing, and I think it was Well, I was trying to remember what I said in the video, right? I think it was at the end I was like, ambiguity gives you flexibility to move characters through the plot. And that's what the original Hyperspace was. It was ambiguous, and you could people could move as fast or as slow as you needed them to through the galaxy. And then Luke brought up the ticking clock, and that is I was thinking about, somebody said that J.J. Abrams is the master of the ticking clock. And if you look at the sequence of The Force Awakens, the final sequence of The Force Awakens, there's a lot of ticking clocks happening there. And without specific time increments on them. I think there's only one in that whole sequence where he's like, where they actually put a real clock on something. I think it's like 30 seconds right before they blow the thing up. But other than that, there is when this happens, this will happen, or when this event occurs, there will be, and this event is coming, then there will be something bad, or this event occurs and that'll lead to this event and this event or whatever. So you have
got to prevent the event.
Yeah, and so there are there's the ticking clock isn't the right phrase there. It's more like a sort of Damocles, right? Like this impending doom is coming, and you've got to stop it. But it is getting closer. Anyway, what the heck were we talking about in this episode?
I don't listen. It's
they jump away, and then I think we go to the doctor.
The next scene is on Coruscant, which the time frame apparently is roughly 9 years after Return of the Jedi. So the Empire has been kicked out. The New Republic is taking over, and now we're seeing how maybe not general public, because the scene opens on the opera which we saw in Episode 3, where Palpatine did the infamous speech about Darth Plagueis. So it's the same room that they're in there. And
I did not get that.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So the room itself obviously looks way different, but look at the opening shot when they're actually going up the red steps and the lobby entrance. Like, I recognize that lobby exactly. And it's just from 2 seconds of Anakin running across the lobby and then going up the stairs.
I think I was really just more taken with the whole we're on Coruscant again. And
yeah,
how cool is that?
Yeah,
it was so cool. Also, Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? I don't know how good my Ian McDermott is not great.
Not from a Jedi.
Yeah.
Not from a Jedi. I just being on Coruscant, I've been talking about this for ages. Why the fuck am I not seeing a Star Wars noir detective story set on Coruscant?
They had pitched one at one point, didn't they, Ryan?
Yeah, well, there was.
They should do it.
They should do it. They were going to make a video game about it. There's like 2 or 3 episodes of Clone Wars where they do it, and it's the best shit ever. Where
It's the worst, but it's also it's that arc is really bad, but it's saving grace is that it's on Coruscant. And you're right. That sequence is excellent because it's on Coruscant and it's exploring everything that there is, but overall, that sequence is really bad. But
what I would say is, it's good in spite of the arc because of Coruscant.
Yes, I would 100% agree with that. But like there was something else. Going back to the ambiguity gives you flexibility. They put a number on something, and it was just one of those things of it's implausibly unbelievable, and it's just like it's like a hard stop for my brain when she said something like, "There's 1 trillion people living on Coruscant." And I was like, that's a really big number.
I don't know who it is. Someone needs to sit Dave Filoni down. Ask him to please take your hat off, you're inside, and explain to him that, because he does this a lot in Clone Wars. There is a way that you can talk about scale that communicates scale without saying things like 1 trillion that just like frankly sound silly. Like it's goofy. It's a goofy thing to say out. It's a goofy thing to put in your script.
I actually stopped it and rewound it like a couple times because I was like, they did not say that. They really did. Did I hear that right? She said 1 trillion, and yeah, it's 1 trillion.
I mean, the interesting.
I guess it's a city planet. But
I was about to say that's the interesting point about it is that like I could argue that that's logical because like they even talk about it. I think in that episode that every time they want to build more, they just build on top of the city that exists. So the old house of your grandfather is like 40 floors below you, and he's still living there. So they just keep adding people on top of existing people, and so it makes kind of sense that they could have that many people on the same planet. But
I don't think I would say many billions, but a trillion is an unfathomably big number. But before you start talking, David, there's a book. I'm hoping you've read it.
Book.
What is it called? It's one of. You ever read James Michener?
Oh yeah, when I was at university.
The Tell. Do you know that one? It's so the basic concept is a lot of like how I see Coruscant is that you like the Tell in Hebrew, like Tel Aviv just means spring hill. So Tel means hill. And the way like these cities and towns in the Middle East are so old that basically like you start with like a flat plain and they build a village. And then the Hittites come through and burn it down. And nobody lives there for a bit, and then people come back and then they build on top of it. And then the Romans come through and they burn it down. And then so on and so forth over time, so that this flat plain becomes a little hill. And that's the Tell. So that like and this is true, this is a big problem that they have in a lot of these like really old cities like Rome, where like they want to go build something and it takes them 10 years because they go down 10 feet and they're going back like 4,000 years of history. And they have to decide, well, do we want to keep any of this stuff? I mean, we're just drowning in ancient junk. Like let's document it, but get rid of it, And so that's a lot of what like I think about Coruscant. And going back to the bad arc of Clone Wars, it was very cool to see that visualize the going down into the lower depths, etc. The layers of Coruscant. But the idea that like you can go all the way down to the bottom and there's like a lot of people down there, to me it stretches belief a bit.
it's funny what Luke said, because he was like, if there's that many people, what do they eat? How do they get water?
I was just thinking about that. Like, if you have a trillion, like, how many pounds of food do people eat a day? Like a pound and a half, 2, 3?
Well, are you American or something else? Because that's a big factor.
Let's say conservatively, you consume a pound of food a day. That is 1 trillion pounds of food every day. And then think about how much waste that is, and how much water you need. And yeah, it's an unfathomably big number.
Okay, so now we have the shirt that says "What do they eat?" and then now we need a different shirt that says "Where do they defecate?"
Where do they?
No, that was
poop,
part of
though?
the original question of
It is.
identification. What do they eat?
Yeah.
Where do they poop? Go back and watch that video. It's in there. He says it. Where do they poop?
Yeah,
Where do they sleep?
It's important. You reminded me of a Georges Louis Borges essay where he talks about I think it's I don't know who it was, but someone was asking about like how do you talk about scale? I think it might have been Luke. And Georges Louis Borges wrote these really short, interesting essays that were sort of like philosophical thought experiments. And he has one where he says, imagine there's a country, and the cartographers of that country decide that they're going to make the most accurate map of the country they can. And they make a really accurate map on paper. And someone says, yeah, it doesn't have enough detail, though. It doesn't show us the roads. So they get an even bigger piece of paper. And they do an even bigger map. And then they go, okay, but it doesn't show you the specific houses. You just have like general shapes. And then so then they get it. They paint a giant mural in the center of the main city square. But that doesn't have enough detail because you can't see the pathways between the houses. And so eventually, in his essay, he talks about, you know, the nation grows ambitious with their plans. And they realize that the only way to build an accurate map of the country is to make a scale map of the country. And so they build the map of the country atop the country. And the kingdom crumbles under just the ambition of this project. And it ends with something like, if you walk into the dunes at the right hour after dusk, you can still see, you know, wolves sleeping in the bones and the ruins of the once great nation. And it's this idea that like one of the hardest things about art and communication is that we as artists must confess that the most accurate representation of a thing is the thing. And you're trying to provide this kind of impressionistic, minimalistic, essentialist version of a reality. And I think I kind of just like I think this is where CinemaSins breaks down as a utility. Is I don't think that logic is always necessarily an appropriate tool to bring to bear on text, because you're right, Darth. Even though it logically makes sense that there could be that many people, it doesn't feel true. And that's such a wishy-washy thing to say out loud, but it doesn't feel true because it feels so like
implausible.
You kind of squint at it and you just go, what? Like, I don't know. The Matrix does a good job of this, where in the Matrix you go, okay, all the last survivors of humanity live in this big underground city. How do they get water? Oh, they have these big things that collect the rain from outside. What do they eat? This terrible protein slop that has all the nutrients in it, but you need like one bowl a day.
Tasty.
Like they solve that handily. Yeah.
Okay, let's get back into the plot, because we haven't even gotten to like the cool bits that we were all excited about. Granted, Coruscant was awesome. I was right there with you, just reveling, and every time we go back to Coruscant, I just love it.
Make that show, Disney,
please.
Right. I remember they had pitched it a while back when they were pitching the Rogue One show and then all this other stuff. It was going to be like Tales of Coruscant or something. Tales of the Underworld of Coruscant. I don't remember what the name was.
What? That's a banger. If that's that's cool.
Yeah, I was hyped for that. So then we meet up with Doc, and we meet up with the girl Elia Kane, and they are part of the group of Empire employees who are reconditioned in whatever form that means. We don't really get a super good idea about it, whether it's like actual, are they brainwashed to be good, or do they just like have to sit and recite certain poems over and over until the Republic thinks that they're good now, or what is
Morgan
their
Freeman.
actual
Morgan Freeman going in front of the panel like, "Are you rehabilitated?"
Yeah. So like, what is their reconditioning? Was like an immediate thought for me, but I'm not sure how much that really pulled me out of the story. But anyway, so there's this whole group of reconditioned people. The girl meets up with Doc, and she like seems to hit it off with him. And eventually he starts talking about his research, and she's like, you do good science, you should keep doing good science. And then that whole thing slowly evolves, but we get the tour of the city that she takes him on. We see the mountain of Coruscant poking through, which is apparently the only bit of physical land on the entire planet, is just this tip of the tallest mountain
That you can see.
Yeah, which is so cool.
Okay, that makes sense. I was gonna ask, what does that mean? Okay.
It's a gas giant.
Yeah. No, that's
No, I'm kidding.
I was about to say. David didn't even register.
That was a joke.
Yeah.
That was a joke. I didn't clock that. That's cool.
I want to talk about the for a little bit, at least, the reconditioning program, because this, I think, was or I think a better word for it would be the amnesty program, which is, I think, what they call it.
Yeah.
Because it is one of those things of somebody sat down and thought about and extrapolated what would you do in a post-Empire situation. And it's like you would have a lot of Empire folks out there, and of course, a lot of them died, and apparently some of them ran off into the unknown regions, etc. But what do you do with the ones that are like, they were Empire only because the Empire was there, and not the true believers, but just the day-to-day grunts, or this guy, the scientist, who was more interested in the science rather than than how his science was being applied by the Empire, etc. So like, I think he goes into his whole backstory of like, why I'm interested in doing this and why it's important to me. And it was, I think we've talked about before, people doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. But I thought like that little sort of window into what a program like that would look like was very cool, that somebody sat down to think about that.
Yeah.
And what that would look like.
It made the world really feel, I don't know if bigger is the right word, but it felt so realistic, is kind of what I think you were describing.
Yeah, it gives it texture. What you can really feel this is some real like post World War II. What do we do with all of the Nazis?
Yeah, denazification.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really interesting war books and things like that written about this specific thing. Some really good Steve Pressfield joints on this kind of idea, which is like, yeah, you should have trials for like the generals and the leaders and stuff, but like, what do you do with people that didn't have a choice? And like, what do you do with all the good Nazis? And that's a really complicated question. Huh?
It's that you always have a choice.
Yeah, exactly.
No, you don't. You don't.
I'm being facetious, but
it's funny that
Nazis, it's a complicated idea, I think.
I was going to say, go ahead, Ray.
I was going to say the other really interesting part of that whole like a denazification program is that like, you have a country, I mean, here it's applied to the whole galaxy, but like in like post-war World War II Germany, or post Iraq War Iraq, everybody who knew how to do anything had to be of the party that you wanted to eradicate. So what do you do with those people in order to, there it is, medicinal. And what do you do with what, like, you need people to do these things, but the only people that can do these things are the people that you want to exclude from society. So you have to figure out a way to reintegrate them.
Yeah, and the I
And I
think
guess separate the true believers from the people that are just there.
that was the thing I was gonna try and pull on there. Is I think it's a really challenging thing to at a political level, uh, and this is why politics rocks and should be in everything. Is like, what does that mean? Like, what is the difference between a true believer and a participant who didn't have a choice? And I think Star Wars at its best is when it takes these politics and draws them into a very specific individual experience of a system. Um, Specifically, what I mean by that is, and I'm not saying this to dig on America, but American politics has this particular framework of everything becomes about how it affects you. And that's just the way that politicians talk about things, is like, how will this affect how much you are paying tax? How much will this affect your job security? Things like that. Star Wars, at its best, is about individual people being actors in a system, realizing they're in a system, realizing they are somewhat powerless to change it, and talking about it. And this episode, they talk about it. And the same reason I love Andor is the same reason why I love this episode. They talk about it, which just rules. I think it is very difficult to do well. And I appreciate that this episode doesn't flinch and it feels very natural. And as you said, Darth, it gives it a bigness and a sense of scale that is achieved without saying the word trillion.
The interesting thing I wanted to point out was just how different this depiction of reintegration was from what actually happened in reality when Americans were like looking at the German scientists. We were like, come do your science for us. Like, we want you, do your science. But this is the exact opposite. It's like, we know you are super good at this and we won't let you do it anymore, even though it would be beneficial to us. And that feels like too intentional of a decision to not have like a really solid reason behind, unless they're just doing that for the plot contrivance of giving him a reason to, rebel against him because he wants to do his science.
Well, I mean, so I think what you're looking at there is the different sort of mentality and approach of like an empire-ish system versus like the New Republic or whatever, where and I keep thinking about like Star Trek and Dr. Bashir from Deep Space Nine with the whole thing about genetic engineering. That, like, yeah, you can, with genetic engineering, you can create somebody like Dr. Bashir, who is like handsome and brilliant and a good dude and really good doctor, etc. But like that application is considered extremely bad. Like it puts his career in jeopardy when they find out that he's genetically engineered. So it's like he's out there talking about like the good that can be done with the kind of science that he's looking for, but they're looking at it as thinking about the evil or the badness that can be done with the science that he's talking about. Whereas the Empire would be like, we can make better shit with this. Let's do it. And so like he's getting the science that he wants to do because, again, like his motivations are, I don't know if pure is the right word, but they're he's coming from the right place. Would you just say that right, David? He's coming from the right place, or his motivations are coming from the right place. Yeah.
His motivations are necessarily apolitical because of who he is, and he is coming from the right place, but in being apolitical does the wrong thing with his intent. Like, his intention has the bad outcome. He does it for the wrong guys.
Yeah, because they take his science and they pervert it, essentially. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually, this is a really good episode. If you've ever wondered why, when someone says, "I'm apolitical, I'm a centrist," or whatever, someone will say, "Okay, so basically you support the right then." That's because the right is the status quo in capitalism, and being centrist means that you necessarily are endorsing the status quo. And so this guy is in a position where he's just a big nerd. He just wants to do his science, and he is really excited about it and really passionate about it. and is trapped in a system that necessarily makes him culpable for the Empire. And that's really like he's a victim of circumstance, but also that's everybody, because everyone lives in a system and therefore everyone is politicized. And yeah, he comes from the right place, and he seems to be grappling with the fact that, like, yeah, you know, they won't let me do this anymore, and it's my thing. It'd be like if they said, no, you can't write books because whatever scenario, you're not allowed to write books anymore. And you'd sit there and you'd be like, but that's all I want to do. That's the thing I'm made to do. And even if you were writing books when you were in Germany during the Nazi occupation and you weren't a Nazi, afterwards, with hey, you can't write books, you'd be like, what the fuck? Like, I was just writing, they weren't even Nazi books. So you can kind of see, how they're pulling on those threads. I mean, also, like, the Clone Wars is explicitly an analog in the prequels for Iraq and the invasion that America did there. And you can feel the tension of those ideas being re-explored here finally, in a way that the Clone Wars show sometimes gets right and sometimes doesn't. But this really feels like some Andor shit in that regard.
One of the parts that I really liked with sticking with the whole amnesty sequence, like towards the beginning of it, is when they're like, hey, like, come sit, have a drink, and they just talk about the everydayness of being in the Empire.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
And then they talk about, like, he's like, you know what I miss? I miss the space biscuits, or whatever he called them. And she's like, oh, I like the red ones. They're like, ew, the red ones. And like, there is it's the kind of storytelling that I really like, where it's just you throw out this little thing and there's just so much that you can infer from the little stuff like that.
Yeah. Or even just saying, I think someone said like the look of hyperspace or something, or flying is like simple everyday stuff. Like, you don't get to fly anymore if you're not in the Navy. You don't get to go out on the ocean if you're not,
right.
you know, like cool stuff that you don't get to do, even though you may have been out shooting innocent people while you were out in the Navy. You were also flying around in space and having adventures and stuff. And
well, I think it's kind of getting to it. Like, it's a little bit towards what a lot of people, or at least a lot of people that I've heard, want to see the Empire side of things. And it's like, a lot of times that gets misconstrued as they want to see the Empire go around and, like, wreck shit and, you know, hail Palpatine and all that stuff, and, like, the Empire did nothing wrong, hashtag. But, like, not like, I don't think that's necessarily what most people that say that want. I think they just want that grunt level perspective of the everydayness of the Empire. And I think that would be another interesting show to do, I believe.
yeah.
You get that a little bit in season 2 of Mando, when he and the comedian guy go undercover. You get to see, like, the inner workings of that Empire mind.
Yeah.
This is my answer to Luke's question before about, like, how do you talk about scale well? And it's about picking specific everyday minutia and framing it in an interesting way. Talking about what all is going on with the Empire, like, at work, is much more interesting than Kylo Ren espousing their philosophy a lot of the time, because we talk about work in a particular way and these guys talk about work in a particular way, and they reminisce. It's that old job I used to have. Man, I miss the office. It was in such a good spot. Boy, I don't miss that shitty coffee machine we had, though. You know, it's got that same kind of flavor to it.
It's showing, it's not telling.
It's showing, it's not telling. With the telling is saying trillions. This is showing, and it's the most Dave Filoni shit ever to have both in the same episode, because he does this all the time in Clone Wars, where you're like, this man's a god king, he's a genius, and then a character will turn around and be like, I'm a bad guy. And you go, what? Huh? What? I completely agree. I think very, very engaging television as well. Really feels like there's, like, it, I don't know what the word is, but it feels like there's actually, these people are talking about something and having a conversation. They're not just saying lines of dialogue.
Yeah. Expositing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what did you think of the fact that they all had code names, numerical assignments instead of
I
like
thought that
actual
was
names?
I thought that was weird.
Um, it seemed way more normal, and I don't know if this even makes sense. It seemed normal in the sequels for Finn, but it seems abnormal for this because they're introducing it into something that already exists. So we have like Admiral Piet. Like Vader says the dude's name. So the Empire people had names. So the only inference is that, okay, if you graduate high enough, when you become an officer, are you then given a name? And then when you become the next level, are you given a different, you know, it
His
doesn't
name
seem
is
to.
Robert Paulson.
I I
It makes you think, doesn't it? Right? Is what you're saying.
we all live in a society.
No. Tacking on to what Darth was saying, it's like that. I think it really pulled me out of what was going on because I was thinking about it a lot, like what Darth was saying about, like, okay, just extrapolate again the idea of these people, like, oh, you're TL52 or I'm GK55.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is what people have been the fans who hate the sequels. This is what they've been worried about from the very beginning, that at some point these shows are going to diverge and it will be directly leading to the sequels as opposed to just being its own contained, fun stories. And this, the naming of these characters is exactly that in my mind. It's like they are only doing that because we know that Finn is named that way, so they are going on and introducing it to us now.
Can I cold shot something to counter that? And you would know this if you had watched the Clone Wars and were a real fan.
I'm working through it. I'm doing like 2 episodes a day. Even after I finish it, you're gonna be like, I finished it like way before you did. You're not a real fan.
I've actually seen it twice.
I knew all that stuff before you did.
Yeah. No, I'm kidding. One of the things that the Clone Wars is so close at all times to talking about, and very rarely does, and when it does, it's the coolest shit, is the clones themselves, right? The clones are designated by serial numbers and codes. But the what are the good guys called?
I think Luke B hit the point that you're trying to make there.
The Republic.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. The Republic lets them, even though, my serial number is B2117, that's your clone name or whatever, even though that's true, they give each other nicknames and they decorate their armor and they make themselves, and they're all the same guy, right? They're all Boba Fett's clone, but the system lets them develop a sense of self inside of the system. And I think there's something here where I wonder if this idea of them having these code name is not what I mean, but these serial numbers. I wonder if there's an interplay there because obviously the Republic becomes the Empire. I wonder if there's an interplay there between how the Republic treated the clones and how the Empire treated its employees. And then I also wonder if they're trying to pull on the World War II thread as well, where if you go into if you're a prisoner of war, you get a number, not a name, because it lets them mistreat you easier.
Yeah, I was about to ask that. Were these names, were they assigned by the Empire, or were they assigned when they went through this reintegration program by the Republic? Does it say?
I don't remember.
She says she never introduced herself. Yeah, she says like they worked on the same ship. She never introduced herself, and then she gives her actual name, like that's what she would have done back then. Which kind of makes me think that these numerical designations were given by the Republic when they were reclassifying everyone, which is interesting. Okay. What next? The glowing lollipops, was that interesting? Glowing popsicles? I don't know.
It was a cool effect.
It looked tasty. I wanted one. I don't know what it would be, but
You trying to snack on it?
I wanted that.
I will say the common thread through most of through most of this whole sequence was I felt like I didn't trust her, that she was up to something, and I couldn't put my I couldn't decide like what is she trying to accomplish. Clearly she's trying to accomplish something, but what is she trying to accomplish?
I think the better way to do it would have been her trying to talk him out of it. And then that reverse psychology would have talked him into it. And then it would have been less obvious at the end when she was the turncoat. But because she was overtly trying to get him to do something illegal, it just came off as disingenuous from the very beginning. And the whole time I was like, I want to like her, but now I distrust women who are nice to me. Like that was the that was the whole vibe that I got from this episode.
God. He's the college frat dude who had like a bad relationship that broke bad, and he's like, yeah, I don't trust women anymore because she done me dirty one time.
You could just see that when he's like lying on the table, he's about to get his memory wiped, and he was like, I thought we had a thing.
You sure you don't want to get dinner?
Yeah.
So what are you doing after?
Yeah. So after this, what got any plans?
That would be how a guy responds to that.
Yeah, exactly. Just some head empty shit. I love it.
Yeah. No, I don't necessarily disagree with the way that they played it. I think at the end of the episode, to skip forward a little bit, not the end of the episode, but the end of this sequence, there is a lingering question to me of what exactly her motivation is, because part of me thinks, has she totally sold out to the Republic, and is she just there to entrap Empire people, former Empire people? Because that's what it was. It was entrapment. Or is she still working for the Empire and afraid of his knowledge of science, like the Republic latching onto that? So it's better to entrap him and have that knowledge erased.
That's how I read it, but that's also her assuming she would be in the room and able to fully wipe his memory instead of only partially wipe his memory. But yeah, I read it as that because she was on that ship and she knew what he was up to, she knew how dangerous he was, or however dangerous whatever knowledge he had was, and she was still loyal to the Empire, so she was going to get him in as much trouble as possible.
Yeah, I will again go out on a limb and bet you all $1 that we're going to get some recontextualization later on with her.
I saw someone point out that apparently the actress is actually a martial artist, and they were wondering if like she's going to have a much bigger role coming up. Although Star Wars has like severely underutilized martial artists before. I pointed it out in one of my videos that the guys from The Raid, I don't know if y'all have seen that, but super cool action film. And like they were the pirates that got eaten by the rolling tentacle monsters. Like they just ran around screaming, and that was it. But those were the super martial artists, and they just had them run around and get eaten.
Why do we keep giving J.J. Abrams money to make films? I don't understand. Lost was fine. Let's all get over it. God.
Okay. Yeah, so back on point. She talks him into it. He goes to her dorm room and is like, "Hey, help me steal some stuff." So then they get on the train, which flies through the city. We get more awesome panorama shots of the city. Oh my God,
it's cool.
It's
so cool.
Is where they get off the train, is that not where Ahsoka was trying to escape during the Clone Wars?
It depends on if you've seen it or not.
Do you know what I'm talking about,
yes,
David?
I think it's
the betrayal arc or whatever.
I think it's supposed to be.
It looked very similar. It's been a while since I've seen it.
It's Filoni wrote this, so it's probably likely that he, in his script, was like the same place where Ahsoka did it. If you've read Dave Filoni's scripts, he does write stuff like that because it helps, Jon Favreau be like, okay, I need to go watch that episode of the Clone Wars so that I know what I'm doing here. So I would guess probably. I'd have to compare side by side, but
I had assumed that they set that up on purpose, or like there was like a literal landing pad there. Like she landed on a mattress or something, or they landed on like some kind of, cushion when they jumped. And I was assuming that she had set that up before because she did this so many times. And then I realized retroactively that that was just the Republic set up that landing pad for her.
Oh, of course.
Oh, you're right.
But then it also brings up the point is like, why was the robot going after them to try to catch them if it already should have known she was on their side, unless it was
believable, man.
I guess, yeah. Unless the idea was just to physically push them off the train, but they were going to jump anyway. So, I mean, that whole thing retroactively just didn't make as much sense.
I think it was one of those things where it looked cool, and they went, just send it, because it's a cool sequence. And then you kind of you sit back and you go, wait a minute. But at that point, I was so in the story that until you brought it up, I honestly hadn't thought about it. Like, yeah. That's how engaged I was in what was happening.
So I went back and forth about hating this and loving this. So I'm curious of what y'all think. A couple different times she says it like a human would, and then he says it trying to be a human, and he doesn't know how to talk, and he's like, "Tongs Day, am I right? Tongs Day suck. It's the middle of the week. It's Tongs Day." Did y'all like that or hate it? What was?
I get that Garfield is funny. Don't be putting Garfield in my Star Wars, okay? Is my response to this. I rolled my eyes so fucking hard. That's my opinion anyway. That was how I felt.
I liked it because it added a layer of texture, to use David's word from earlier. So I like the fact that they have words for days of the week because every culture would, but introducing it out of the blue like that in a fashion that was just, it was too real life, I guess. Like you if you were on a bus, you would totally hear people say, "Man, Wednesdays suck," or "Mondays suck." Like it was too normal to me, and it just kind of pulled me out of the story. Even though at the same time, I was like, "Oh, I know I know their word for one of the days of the week," which is cool.
I think what you're getting at there is some of the dialogue in the sequel trilogy that's just sounds too this worldish. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the second that...
Let's go, Chrome Dome.
You lying snake.
Oh, let's not even go there. The second that you use proper nouns... Here's David's quick genre lesson. Proper nouns for things is a very sci-fi thing. To be like, it's a glib glorp, or it's a fucking whatever. You make up names for regular... Instead of saying it's a 6-inch wrench, you go, it's a quantum spanner or whatever, like whatever the thing is, right?
Casually quoting Community over here.
Is that Community?
Yes.
Oh, it is.
I'd hit it with an inverse tachyon beam.
What was my point? It's proper nouns is very sci-fi, but like we were talking about before with describing scale and creating texture, if you go too specific, it pulls you out of it as well, because it can sometimes feel like if you guys ever read like 70s and 80s sci-fi, they're all like this. They're all this like hyper trying to think of the way to describe this. Like hyper sort of over stylized and over monikered universes where everything has a proper noun. Like no one just refers to it as a door. Everything has like a specific, that's a clamp, that's an automatic clamp shut or whatever. And it just, it can feel very corny or I'm not sure if that's the right word, but you know what I'm trying to get at. Like it feels kind of goofy in a way, because sci-fi, when it's at its best, doesn't deal with proper nouns directly. It deals with concepts and the everyday minutia of sci-fi. And conversely, fantasy, when it's at its best, deals with proper nouns in the context of everyday minutia. And so I think it's one of these things where the reason I was being obviously flippant before about the Garfield thing, but it really did to me. It just felt like someone like thought a Garfield joke would be funny, and then they used the word for it, and I went, just fucking say Wednesday. You can just have Wednesdays in Star Wars. That's fine.
I think Luke brought up a good point there, which was that when they add in all that extra stuff, it makes you think that the writers really put their work in, and it gives everything a little more credibility, so that you think, oh, they labeled all this stuff, oh, they must really know what they're doing, and it lets them be way more lazier with the actual story because they spent 2 hours naming all of the different parts of the story, you know.
That's why the original Star Wars trilogy is so good, because George Lucas didn't give a fuck about the universe and the world. He used it as a setting to tell a really interesting story. And this is why, and I will say this till I fucking die, or until someone comes and beats me to death for saying it for too many times, but there's a reason why he calls them laser swords. Because it doesn't matter what they're called. What matters is their utility in the story. And their potential for narrative tension and creation, and their potential for character drama and character conflict. It doesn't matter if it's a lightsaber or a whack-a-madoo, right? And I think I don't know.
Luke, this was your father's whack-a-madoo.
This was your father's whack-a-madoo. Yeah. I think it's one of those Star Wars is a really good story to be interested in if you are interested in learning about how stories work, because I think they often, I don't know, it runs the gamut from really, really excellent execution, and then little bits and pieces. This is a great episode, but it has little bits and pieces where you go, man, if only someone had caught that. It's just, yeah, it pulled me out of it. But I get your point, Darth, and I appreciate that it does add texture, and it makes you go, oh yeah, they would have a word for this.
Yeah,
and it didn't work for me.
I went and looked it up because I was just kind of curious about what are they saying, and apparently I don't even know if I'm saying it the right way, but the Tong is some kind of animal that used to live on the planet 1,000 years ago, and there was some hunt for them on the middle day of the week, so that's why they started calling the middle day of the week Tong's Day, or so. They actually had thought behind the word when they invented the word. Of course, whoever wrote that however long ago in Star Wars lore, so it was just It was just interesting. So anyway, so they're moving down the train, they jump off the train, they see the cool yard with all of the dead ships out there, and she picks the lock to open the door to get them into the ship. He starts loading up all of his science gear into a huge glowing lunchbox, and then they get that. They're out in the hallway, and they have a moment where she's introducing herself to them, and they have an actual emotional connection right before she decides to stab him in the back, which still makes zero sense, because at that point she has him. At that point he's caught. I do not understand this whatsoever, because that scene is it's just the last little gotcha moment for the audience. I don't understand how it's applicable to the scene to get him to further trust her at that point. It makes no sense.
I don't remember that part that you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm real hazy on the details, but if I had to guess, I think it's supposed to be the reminder before the reveal, because you get the initial seed of distrust planted when you first meet her. This is the reminder, and then you get the reveal that,
So this is outside the story. This is for us, not for him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I honestly, I'll have to rewatch that sequence. I don't know. I don't remember. Maybe I was confused. I'm trying to think of even I'm trying to put it together in my memory, and maybe that's not a good sign that I don't remember. I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of that.
Yeah. I could be misremembering, and she introduces herself before they walk into the lab, and he starts loading up his stuff, so he hasn't technically committed a crime yet because he hasn't stolen anything from the ship. But still, same point is, why does she need him to trust her? He's already followed her out and jumped off a train. She doesn't need to convince him to trust her more at this point. So that whole thing just feels odd, but I'm curious to hear your reaction when you watch it a second time. And especially when like the whole thing felt so genuine, I was like, I love this. It's like the two like evil people, and they're like, I was too evil back then to actually talk to you. So like a good human, I'm gonna be like, hey, this is my name. I'm gonna look you in the eye and shake your hand. Like, I loved the scene, and it just doesn't actually make sense in context.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think it's one of those things like it's cool and good, but it kind of like it probably could have used a little finessing, I think, to make it squeak a little bit cleaner.
Yeah, Luke could have a point. That he said that it may be out of character, but she could be toying with him like he's her prey. Which would indicate that she like maybe this whole thing is just because she has a grudge against him specifically. And I can't really remember what happened back in season 1, because he was somehow involved in stuff back then. I don't remember if he like did he like betray the Empire or something?
No, I think he was like,
or
wouldn't he tell him about he would tell him the general guy about Grogu or whatever. He's like, go get me the Grogu. Is that him?
So he told on someone. Maybe she was holding a grudge this whole time, and that's why she was just toying with him before she turned him in.
See, I don't get that. I don't get that. What do you call implication? I don't get that from her actions or whatever. Like, there's y'all are probably familiar with this concept of the whole like the she looks, she sees, she feels that thing. So like you know what I'm talking about, Darth?
Yeah, I mean you can't really tell anything at this point. There's not enough data.
No, what I mean is that like the part where he's about to get brainwashed or whatever. Like I don't look at her and see malice, or at least I didn't. Like it felt like she wasn't. I don't know. It was either I might have to go back and watch it again, but it was either completely cold and detached, or a little bit with a little twinge of regret. It did not seem to be malicious. Like she specifically had it out for this guy because of something that he had done to her.
I don't know. I could read it either way, because I like at that point I was paying really close attention to her facial expression because I was so curious as to why she was doing this. And I blame you so hard for this, because I did not used to care so much about characters why, but now if I can't figure it out, I am like harping on
No,
it.
no, it's remember, it's okay for it to be a lingering question. It's just that it's a question that begs answering, a
Yes.
compelling question, if you will.
Yeah.
It's the difference between the Riddler in the Batman and you going, why is he doing this? And you wonder it the whole time, versus what's a really bad Voldemort, right? Why does he want to kill all the mudbloods and take over the world? And it's a question that never gets resolved, because J.K. Rowling's a hack. But she's always been a bad writer, and every writer has known that.
I feel like I want to argue this immediately.
It's fine. We can't get it.
I know, but
that's a whole nother podcast.
Can't get into it right now. It is a whole nother podcast. I have a production plan for that show that I will do eventually. But my point being, yeah, if it's a compelling question that's raised, you will continue watching or reading or consuming to find out. In the same way that, like, when you play The Last of Us and you're like, what are Joel's true motivations here? That is like the crispy, crunchy tension that story is built upon. And you play because every time he tilts his head or avoids a question, you feel like you learn more about that motivation. You're scratching, trying to uncover it. And that when you get a compelling question like that, every morsel of information becomes a clue to that motivation. And that's the exciting part of character, is where it's this well that you just want to keep drawing from and finding out more about, and the restraint of the writers and how they piecemeal out the information you learn about that character is a lot of how pacing in character is made.
So to wrap up that scene, the mind flare, which I guess is, I don't know if it was supposed to be technology that they stole from the living creature, which is something we saw in Rogue One. It was torturing a dude and being used to like literally pull memories out of the dude's brain as this big like octopus looking thing. It wraps his tentacles around the guy's face and he starts screaming and then the camera cuts away. And the idea is that it literally like sucks the memories out of you, but then it also just leaves your brain empty. And it's supposed to be
what?
Yeah, it was like a really horror scene for a Star Wars film. I was kind of surprised when they did it.
I don't remember that at all.
Guess you got a movie to watch, buddy.
Rogue One.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm the fake fan.
So it's supposed to be that same thing, I think, in that if they have it on a low voltage, it just kind of like gets rid of bad feelings or something. But if you turn it up all the way and then it just blatantly erases your memory, I don't know. It was kind of vague.
Yeah, I don't know. It felt like a real sci-fi contraption, didn't it?
Yeah, especially because in Star Wars that it felt off, because it would seem more akin to they would have someone who was force sensitive who would erase your memories using the force, because Star Wars was fantasy. It was not. It's like you said before in other stuff, David, that they're going way more towards sci-fi than it used to be towards fantasy.
You could imagine this being like a potion or something that you drink in the original trilogy. Some kind of concoction that's brewed from the roots of this planet that has particular properties,
Yeah.
I'd disagree. I think if you think back to like Leia's torture scene,
yeah,
I think this is
her what?
David has to watch all the movies.
The awkward moment when Leia is tortured by her dad.
Episode 4, the first movie that ever came out. It's this
Father's
floating
Day.
black ball that has hypodermic needles on it, and it comes floating towards her.
What?
You don't remember that scene?
Fuck, I don't remember anything about Star Wars.
Well,
Okay.
Believe me, it happened. And then there's in Empire, Han is also subjected to a device, but
That was the weirdest thing. That was like a massage table that has needles on it. So when you go down, you get
and like sparks and like it was
stabbed in the face on your massage table.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. I feel. I will say though that like looking at the cleanness or the design of that particular machine, it felt Star Trek to me, not Star Wars.
Sure. Yeah, it's a device Khan might use.
Anything else on that torture scene that y'all have?
I don't think so. I mean, it's gnarly.
Yeah, I loved how they did everything. The reveal, while it didn't come out of nowhere, I liked how they did it. I loved her persona at the end, even though I can't totally read whether she's angry or whether she's determined. And then, and I'm trying to remember when she was talking about it. Was she the one that said that she hated those biscuits and never wanted to taste them again? And then she pulls one out and eats it. So then you're like,
wait a minute.
Wait a minute. Is she dishonest?
And like, if she said she said she liked a particular color of them or whatever, but then she was eating a yellow one, which is a different color. There's so many different ways you could interpret it, but it also, none of it could mean anything. We don't know at this point.
The thing.
I think you go, right?
I was gonna say the thing that I think is, aside from her motivations and what she's doing, which is hopefully a question that gets answered down the road, what is she really trying to accomplish? Aside from that, the more interesting thing to think about in this whole scene is who is doing this to him. This is the New Republic. This is the quote unquote good guys, right? And they're doing something awful to somebody. again, this is the, people doing the wrong thing for the potentially the right motivations or whatever. And I think that this puts this is the kind of gray area that you don't usually get in most Star Wars, especially like George Lucas Star Wars.
Yeah. And he's
It,
all happy about it too. Like he's like, no, this isn't the Empire. We're not brainwashing you. We're just helping your attitude.
yeah, we're not the bad guys. We're the good guys.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really
Maybe the
interesting.
system is the real villain.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Fight the power.
Maybe capitalism is the problem. Do you think that because I wonder about Star Wars with this stuff, because it sometimes talks about this stuff and sometimes doesn't. And obviously it's going to vary on the project, but I think one of the most interesting things about Star Wars is this idea that invariably these systems, if you think about the Empire and you think about the Republic and you think about the Kylo Ren's guys and you think about the planet of politicians they blow up. Jesus, I'm losing all my proper nouns today. The New Republic? No.
Yeah. The New Republic
Order.
and the First Order.
First Order. I wanted to say the Last Order, but that's definitely not right. If you think about all those systems, it's either one or two things. The system is either corrupted by individual bad actors who poison the system, right? Snoke, Kylo Ren, Hux. I guess Hux is technically a good guy, whatever. Within the system, the system is either corrupted and misused by a corrupt individual, Snoke, Kylo Ren, Palpatine, right? Or the system is ineffectual because of bureaucracy. New Republic, even the High Republic, right?
The Jedi.
The Jedi. Oh, the Jedi. I mean, the Jedi is the classic example, right? They got so bound by bureaucracy that they are unable to act and save themselves, save their own existence. And so it's weird. It seems just like Star Wars is like systems and politics are fine as long as there's not bad dudes in them or too many politicians. Doesn't really seem to have a point of view. But it's interesting when it talks about it, is my point. And I feel like this is talking.
There was I've forgotten about something that Darth said earlier about how this fear among some fans that the more that we progress in this in the post OT timeline, the closer we get to the sequel trilogy, and the closer we get to acknowledging its existence, and tying this story in with that story, etc. There is a fear of that within a certain segment of the Star Wars fandom. And I was thinking about that in the context of what he was talking about. And in the last season of Mando, when we saw the clone tanks, I think that was the last season of Mando. It might have been the first season. When we saw the clone tanks, and everybody was like, clearly what they're doing is they're cloning Snoke's, or they're building towards cloning Palpatine or whatever. And then the way that he talked about, if you go back and watch it, the way that he talked about how what he was doing was applied didn't sound anything like that.
Right.
The scientist, you mean?
Yeah, he's interested in cloning, and he's got like the Kaminoan patch, etc. in season 1 and everything. So he's all about the cloning. But the way that the Moff Gideon was applying his science doesn't give you an A, B, C, D between that, what he was trying to do, and Snoke or Palpatine.
Well,
that
possibly.
Just makes me think of Thrawn, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's a Thrawn thing.
I would say that what they're going to end up doing is that Snoke was what this guy was. This guy was splicing genes. That was his whole thing. And so Snoke was the genes of Palpatine combined with Luke. And it got messed up with elephant DNA and it turned into Snoke, right?
I hate Star Wars. Yeah, they're going to do that, aren't they? Fuck. Just let Snoke be a guy. Just let him be a dude. Let him be a weird dude. It happens.
Yeah, but then you raise the question of where the hell did he come from?
It doesn't. It's Star Wars. Where
No,
where
it
the weird
matters.
guys in the
It
bark-
matters.
Where did it
It
come
matters.
from? Where did it go?
So silly. Yeah.
Where did you come from? Cotton Eye Snoke.
Do you think that's like gonna be a plot twist later? Like Mando's all building to like the final closing sequence is like Din Djarin, Bo-Katan, and like some scientists just like over a big cauldron putting in different DNA. I've got Luke's blood, I've got Anakin's blood, I'm gonna put in some elephant, and then they get out a label and write Snoke in Sharpie and then stick it on the vat, and then it cuts to credits.
Maybe Snoke is the. Oh, how far are you in Andor, Darth?
Just go ahead, because I'm. Yeah.
Wow.
I'll just say, David. We never did find out what happened to that guy from the prison.
Oh. Okay. Yeah. That's could be.
Yeah.
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 Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yes. Everybody. Star Wars loves a big continuity swing, don't they?
Everybody's
see
related to everybody else.
There's like one family in the entire universe. Two families. It's the Palpatines and the Skywalkers. That's it. Yeah. I just. Well, hang on. What's the concern? Because I think this is kind of like where this episode wraps up. Is like, what is the concern of it relating to the sequel trilogy? Is it just that people don't like the sequel trilogy?
It's exactly it. So like my Star Wars buddy, just to put this on him, to put him on blast, like he did not care for the sequel trilogy. Very much he did not care for it. And he was very interested in Mando. He especially liked the ending of last season or whatever. But there was I had talked to him about it not that long after, and then he was like, that was really cool. Like it was an emotional. I watched that live with him. It was an emotional event for him to see Luke come out there at the end of season 2, and he was. And then like it was like a couple days later or a week later, he was like, and then it just hit me that this inevitably leads to the sequel trilogy, and I'm just like, eh. And like any sort of acknowledgement that that's where we're going, just really destroys his interest in what's happening.
Yeah, I've heard that from so many people. I was talking in the comments on some other video of mine, where the guy, he was like, I really want to watch this video, but I if I talk about Mando, then I have to talk about how this version of Luke is going to grow up to be the guy who tries to kill his nephew while his nephew is sleeping and is a student of his. Like all of these things, like are coming down the path. So the only way to is just ignore that they're coming and focus on the other fun stories that are going on before that, that terrible darkness gets there.
Right.
Which we are jumping the gun a little, because this wasn't the total end of the episode, because we have to actually go back to Din and Bo.
Oh God, yeah, okay, yeah.
We did kind of talk about that a little bit already, like at the top.
Yeah, we did kind of skip and start on that, but that is how it ends proper. Is they're like, okay, you both took your baths, okay, so we're gonna accept both of you in, and then everyone all comes and gets all touchy-feely on her, and she's like, oh, I guess I'm into this. So
weird. I thought that was just very odd.
This is the way.
This is the way.
Hey, this is the way, baby. That's what's up. Man, it's so, Star Wars fans are so interesting to me, because like it doesn't matter that the sequel trilogy is bad, because the original films exist and there's so much material out there that you can enjoy. But it's one of these things of like, I've talked about this a little bit before, with the Hogwarts game that came out, and people were like, can I ethically play this? And I always think it's a really interesting question for some people who go, well, but this is a really important part of my life, which I understand that media can be really important in that regard. But at a certain point, if I'm talking about a specific type of fan, if Star Wars being bad or the sequel trilogy being bad has such an effect on like your like your personality and your personal reality, I think that calls for like a review of how you relate to the world in some sense, because I think
Some introspection.
Some introspection to kind of be like, what are my values, and like to use like the young people terminology, right? They would say go and touch some grass, but my point would be really think about like, what does that mean? What does that mean for the personality I'm building for myself? What does that mean for who I am? And you can be upset that something you care about is bad, but to be the level of upset that they were is like maybe some introspection is called for here to assess why that might be. And I guess that also comes with like a level of approaching text with kind of maturity and interest in craft and interest in what text functionally is, rather than I guess like staking your personality on it. I just think it's really interesting that there's still fans out there who they've betted so much of their personality in it, which I understand completely. Because for me, like, I've always cared about Star Wars. It's always been like a part of my life. Like I watched them with my dad growing up. But I just like the fact that the sequel trilogy is bad doesn't, for me, change the fact that if they connected Mandalorian to the sequel trilogy, I think that would be fascinating. Like, I'd be really interested in seeing that, even if I know that what's to come isn't bad. So what's to come is bad. Which leads me to my next question, which is what, if that's the case, what era do you guys want to see next in Star Wars? Like, do you go really far prequels, like 2,000 years before, which I'd be super interested in? Do you go like after the sequel trilogy? Like, what era are you guys interested in seeing? Because we're kind of running out of, as you say, we're running out of bandwidth between this and the sequels.
Well, I mean, not entirely, because there is the what was I gonna say? Like the somebody did the math at one point. I don't think it's true in the current season, but it's like the first season, because like in the tribalism of the Star Wars community, you had the what am I saying? You had like, it was like, well, this belongs to the sequels, or this belongs to the prequels, or this belongs to the OT, or whatever. And that was, somebody brought up that I think it was like the first season of Mando is closer to the end of Return of the Sith or Revenge of the Sith than it is.
You did the thing.
Yeah, I did the thing. And it's closer to the end of the prequels than it is to the beginning of the sequels.
What?
In terms of like years or something like that.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Hank, what? When is Mando set?
It's like the difference is like a year or something like that, but it's like 5 years after the end.
Yeah, I was gonna say like 3, so somewhere around there. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
It's unimportant. It's unimportant. But what one of the things I was gonna say, like before we talk about like, you know, new eras to explore or whatever, real quick point I want to make is the show that I was most interested in, aside from Andor. I was really interested in Andor because of who was working on that and writing on it. But the one that I'm most interested in is, or I was, is the Acolyte, because that seemed very far away from anything that we'd seen before.
That wasn't Ahsoka's. What was that one?
The Acolyte?
Yeah.
It's done by the lady that did Russian Doll, which is an interesting take on Groundhog Day. I don't know if either of y'all have seen that.
Yeah, I have. What was the Star Wars show about though? Did they say?
Though it hasn't come out yet.
No, I know, but like, did they pitch? Was there a pitch?
I think it's like a Sith lady in
the
High Republic era, I want to say.
The Acolytes were like
before.
the version of Padawan. Padawan means like Jedi learner. Acolyte was like Sith apprentice or whatever.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I kind of because they're doing a video game set in the High Republic, aren't they? Like, and I'm just like, I think that's just like a really interesting era. Not to repeat myself, but like, it's a lot of politics, and I think that's a really interesting place to try and tell a story. But yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. It'd be cool to see like what the Sith were when they were like a functioning political body instead of just two dudes.
Well, that
bickering.
is, what's that game? The BioWare game.
Knights of the
Old Republic.
Old
Is that
Republic?
Knights of the Old
Yeah.
Republic? The MMO. KOTOR. Is
Yeah.
it SWOTOR? Star Wars the old. It's SWOTOR.
Are you talking about the BioWare game or the multiplayer game?
BioWare MMO.
Is it an MMO?
It's SWOTOR, not KOTOR.
Yeah, KOTOR is the RPG.
Yeah,
SWOTOR.
Yeah,
MMO.
and it was. I think it had to go free to play a while back, but it was. We played the shit out of it for a while, and it's like way in the past when it's essentially you had the New Republic versus the Sith, and the Sith is like they're their own functioning government and bureaucracy, etc., against not the New Republic, but the Old Republic or whatever, and it was cool. Yeah, and then you had like the Hutts going on doing their thing.
Yeah, well, that's
and
a
the
really fun part of
Mandalorians.
Clone Wars too. Yeah, I just think it's like it's just like interesting when these are fully formed political. And don't get me wrong, I love A Dying Earth story and I love the original trilogy. I just think it's like having been thinking about Clone Wars a lot as a result of Mando because of all the connective tissue. Something that proves to me is that a Star Wars show where all of this stuff is still happening is really an interesting place to set it, because like you said, Rye, the Hutts are a big deal in Clone Wars at times, and so are the Mandalorians, and so are like individual planets' governments as the Republic tries to absorb them. Yeah, I don't know. I'd like a prequel trilogy, like something set before the prequels.
So I mean, like, you could go way in the past or way in the future and just throw a rock in either direction, and you're gonna hit something that could be creatively interesting and disconnected from what we have now. And I think that would be fun.
Or they could do what we've talked about before, and they could make a Clone Wars series.
They could do that. It's possible. No one would watch it though if they did that.
Especially not Darth.
He hates clones. He hates them. You guys don't know this, but every time we get off for recording, he texts us. He says, "I hate clones," every time.
So a 4-season series about how blue milk is made.
Heck yeah.
Dirty Star Wars jobs.
Wait, don't we know how it's made? Doesn't Luke take it out of the big monster?
No, that's green milk. It's a totally different. Yeah.
Oh, that's totally different. I'm sorry. That totally. What a dumb mistake to have made. Like, man, I love weird grimy Luke energy. It's so good. He's like, good shit. Do you reckon that's alcoholic? I reckon it is. I reckon he's getting his drunk on.
Well, it's like fermenting in cider.
Yeah, he ferments that green milk. It's like, hey, happy St. Patty's Day.
Yeah.
Or happy St. Tongs Day or whatever. You have to come up with another proper noun for it.
Yeah, another proper noun. Yeah, exactly. Knowing Star Wars, it'd be like happy Patrick Saint Day. Dave Filoni would be like, I did a clever Star Wars name. On a lot of the Star Wars, I know we're getting off track and it's late. On a lot of the Star Wars names, like, they just end up being jokes about real people. If you watch, like, because when I was watching the Clone Wars the last time, I watched all the behind the scenes stuff, like I was saying. And Dave Filoni very proudly will be like, yes, I named that character. And if you spell their name out, it's George W. Bush Jr. And you're like, what?
Yeah. A whole lot of them were just like the actor's name, and you take the last letter and you put it at the beginning, like that kind of thing.
Right.
Which is, I mean, it's cheesy, but also it's consistent. So I'm okay with it.
Oh, I love it. I froth any time someone explains a Star Wars name, because you invariably just end up with your head in your hands being like, what is happening in this story? And I love it. Like, it's so good.
I got one that's really gonna mess you up.
Yeah, go on.
Because like, Lucas was like really intent when he named these characters, and the whole Darth Jar Jar theory. Jar Jar.
I do.
Yeah, we talked about this.
Yes,
yeah.
and Jar Jar means.
I told you this was the one of the few times that I've seen my Star Wars guy get really mad.
But Jar Jar means God twice. So the God of Gods is what Jar Jar means in whatever language he pulled it from.
I hate that so much. Thanks, George. Thanks, George. I mean, I'm not even surprised. Look, he had a big sci-fi story, and he called his main character Luke. Like, he's not exactly punching above his weight when it comes to this stuff. Let's be fucking real with ourselves.
Well, back in the 80s, Luke was a totally different name. You gotta understand.
It's so sci-fi. Star Wars out here being like, oh yes, Jean-Luc Picard. And they're like, I don't know, call him Ben. Fucking serious with me right now.
Actually looking forward to the Rogue Squadron movie. Yeah, it would have been cool.
They canceled it.
They did.
Yeah.
Would have been cool to have Star Wars Maverick.
But that was like immediately after Wonder Woman 2 tanked. Isn't that when she got it canceled?
Yeah. Yep.
Which honestly may have been well deserved because, man, that thing was a cluster.
You know, I don't remember. Did I ever give you my what is it? The blurb on that?
No. Give us the pitch.
I was like, because my mom, she was like, or my dad was very excited about it because they filmed part of that like near where they live. He tried to be an extra in there, and so they were like, oh, Wonder Woman 1984, like, wasn't any good? I'm like, well, it's a 2.5-hour movie. It's probably an hour and a half too long. Like, I was seriously talking to it because like there were some things in there that I really, really enjoyed and liked, but I would be very interested if I had the time to like sit down and take it as sort of an editing challenge to like recut that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there's some good stuff to be had there. It's just I would like extract this character, move this around, cut this whole sequence, maybe change a couple other things, maybe trim it down by an hour and a half, and I think you'd have a really solid, well-paced movie in there.
I think we had a pretty similar opinion about Obi-Wan, to be honest.
Well, something that they didn't do that the Marvel films did so much better is that all of their films really tie in with the others in some way. Like, a lot of people hated Thor: Dark World, but it was essential in setting up one of the Infinity Stones. Like, there was stuff introduced that had a purpose to the overarching story, right?
Yeah.
But in Wonder Woman, was there anything vital to anything else outside of that story? I really don't think there was.
Nah, because they just rolled back time at the end.
Did they?
Oh, I forgot about that. Oh,
time travel. It's the lazy way out.
Damn. I didn't even... If you put a gun to my head and said, tell me the plot of Wonder Woman 1984, I'd be dead. Because I completely forgot that's how.
I know it's Magic Wish. I know that happens, and her dead boyfriend inhabits someone else's body, and then she does what she wants.
Yeah, how many times are they gonna kill that guy and bring it back? I wonder. maybe they cancel. Maybe that's why they read the script for Wonder Woman 3, and they're like, "You're doing it again?" I mean, I get it. He's a handsome. Chris Pine's handsome. I'd bring him back too. I wouldn't kill him.
You just stop killing him.
Since we veered off of Mando again, which due respect, like we talked about Mando almost, which was at least 200% more than the last time.
Without the 20 minutes of Batman.
But there was. Are y'all familiar? I saw something this week that I really enjoyed, and I wanted to bring it up. Are y'all familiar with Epic NPC Man?
What?
I'm about to Google.
All right, so it's a YouTube channel called Viva La Dirt League, and they have these like little 30-second, 1-minute clips where the premise is like there's an NPC that's like kind of self-aware in like World of Warcraft, and like what stuff looked like from his point of view of characters on like infinite loops or people coming up to him and he's like starts talking, they just go skip, accept.
Yeah.
So like they've got like 5 years worth of content of this kind of stuff. I've
seen some of these shorts pop up recently. I've really enjoyed the production value.
Yeah, so there's one of the characters in there, his name's Balin, and he's the local fisherman who he walks by. He's on an infinite loop, and he just walks by the main NPC and like looks at him. He's carrying a fishing rod on his shoulder, and he looks at him and he goes, "Morning, nice day for fishing, ain't it?" And then he leaves, and that's all he says ever. And they took that, and I guess they raised a shit ton of money because they made a 30-minute movie where that character goes on an epic adventure, and again, that's all he says. And it's called Balin's Route, and I fucking enjoyed the shit out of that. Like, I was thinking about one of the writing gurus, I forget who it was, but said like the primary goal of storytelling is to elicit emotion. And I was like, I'm watching this and I'm like, God, like that moved me. And I did that thing that Darth was talking about where like I finished it and I went back and I immediately watched it again. So I want to put that on your radar. You all need to go watch that this week. That's your homework. Last week we got Batman. This week you get 30 minutes of Fisher Dude.
What's it called again?
Balin's Route. I'm gonna get the link.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Oh, they actually had a Kickstarter for it. Interesting.
Actually, I had an idea for a book that was a similar idea that we ended up doing a screenplay of that never ended up going anywhere. But I had this idea of like, you know, in like a tabletop role-playing game, when like characters will go into a tavern and there's always a bartender. We had this idea for a story where the story would be set from the perspective of a bartender in a role-playing game universe, and it would be them progressively realizing that, like, the nature of their disreality, where, you know, the party would come in and they'd, you know, get drinks and take a quest and then leave, and then they'd come back and one party member would be replaced by someone else who acted really similar because it was being role-played by the same person outside of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd start to see the connective tissue, and then would start to address you, the person reading the book, because they started to realize that it was someone like that this was someone telling a story using them as a prop. We didn't end up doing anything with it, but it was like one of my favorite ideas that we ever had. It just didn't quite come together, but it's a really interesting like concept. I think it's like, yeah, what is it like being if it was an Ortelic universe and you lived in it phenomenologically, what would that experience be?
There
Probably
was one of their really clever little skits that they did is the length of time that they've been doing this. It's like I said, it's been like 5-6 years that they've been producing these things. Like there's so much lore in this epic NPC man world. Like they actually have a D&D campaign set in the epic NPC man universe. But there's these two recurring characters who are like they're muggers. And over the course of the little skits and all that, like they've mugged everybody. They've they've mugged like players, they've mugged characters, like they mugged inanimate objects, and then like they get to like this skit, and he's like, they throw so many creative things of like stop beating a dead horse or whatever, and like stuff like that. And then finally one of the guys is like, I know who we can mug them. And he like points to the screen. They're like at us, and then they're like, but you know, we can't take their money. And he's like, no, but we can mug their time. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? He's like, this skit doesn't have an ending.
That's good.
Yeah, it was.
I love shit like that.
It was awesome. So yeah,
David's just watching like a blank screen for like 2 hours because he's like, I'm down for this.
I'm like, guys, you won't believe it. I found my new favorite thing. Just another thing that I like that's bad.
All right, so that's y'all's homework. Go watch that 36-minute thing.
Cool. Okay, I will. I'll
and me having bigged it up, you're probably not going to enjoy it as much, but I thought it was really good.
So
I'm gonna write back and be like, yeah,
that was some shit.
Just wasted my fucking time, dude. What the hell?
I want those 36 minutes of my life back.
Yeah.
So wrapping up, I think we had like 4 more hours to talk about the Batman. I don't know where we left off, but
Well, let's start off there next week.
Yeah, this live stream series is ostensibly now just going to be about the Batman.
We can do that.
And then we'll
fine.
talk about Mando eventually.
Yeah.
Eventually.
So we just got to rewatch the Batman every week. That sounds.
Oh my god, it's like 3.5. I am gonna rewatch it this week though, just in preparation for next week, because I'm stoked to think about it again.
Yeah. I wanted to, but I realized the time commitment and just watched a synopsis.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
I'm sitting
Take
here
it,
judging
man.
you.
Yeah. Don't want to watch Clone Wars. Bloody. Won't watch Andor. Won't even watch the Bat. What will he watch, folks?
Tune in next time to find out.
Yeah, tune in next time to find out.
All right. I'll I think Luke already left. Thank you, whoever's still here, and we'll see you next time. Are we saying next Darth time, next Darth channel? Because
Oh my god, that's not even. It's come on, dude. It's same Darth time, same Darth channel. Get the reference right.
no one here was alive for that reference besides us.
That's a good point. All these kids are like, what the fuck are they talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah. Okay, good night.